Hello and welcome back to Raise Gaming and more Title Update 1. Today we continue the updated builds for Title Update 1. This time, of course, one of my old mains, Dual Blades. What would be your optimal DPS set in this update, and what would be maybe a lot nicer to play, but only slightly behind that? And with that, and also very important third set you will want to use in regards to Dragon, because Convert Element is significantly more relevant in Title Update 1, not only because you can get those 2 levels of it on a talisman, but it's more reliable to proc those Dragon Blasts as part of the skill as we'll talk about. So we have an incredible Dragon set where we commit minimally to Element and yet push just below the Element cap there, benefiting from also massive 310 procs of Dragon Explosions. It's incredible. Other changes that are relevant have hit though, like the Mantle stuff, so we have lots to talk about, like the new Dual Blades here, the Shia ones, and then you skill Whiteflame Torrent, and importantly an updated setup for the Artian element weapons, as we'll discuss. But before we get into that, I need to give the important credit that's deserved as usual. A big thank you to Josh for his work on the builds and the math we're presenting today. While I'm the one that plays the Dual Blades, it's his efforts and the builds based on our discussions. And on top of that, a thank you to Cotton as well for his work on understanding Convert Element before Title Update 1, so we can see how it's changed in TU1. So let's get started. Right then, our first very important topic is the weapon of choice. Naturally, Dual Blades lends itself well to Element on paper, but Element's been in a weird place in Wilds. You can reach very high Element numbers thanks to those Artian weapons, but when the Element hit zones are so low for the tier 3 monsters, is it actually worth it? And sadly the answer seems to be no, not to commit to Element fully, to be specific. So we're going to push our raw as high as we can, while still benefiting from Element at the same time. This then as usual means multiple setups of Dual Blades, you know, the different Element weapons to use against the monster's best weakness with the correct element. So in the case of Title Update 1, that'd be Dragon for Shia and Thunder for Mizutsune. But before we get into this whole Artian craft and reinforce topic, let's cover the new Shia Dual Blades. And I'm just going to cut to the chase on these. It's unfortunate, but they're one of the hardest to justify from the 14 versions of these new weapons. While it definitely competes with Artian Element in its own way, it does undeniably have 5 less raw, less element, but most offensively here is the fact that Dual Blades is desperate for 3 offensive decoration slots, and you simply don't get that with the Shia Dual Blades with the 3-2-1 slots. Taking a look at, say, my Thunder Dual Blades here, we have the element attack and 1 level focus. We also have razor sharp and that 1 level of handicraft, and then we have the critical boost. You could argue for crit element instead of the focus, and you simply cannot fit that on 3-2-1 decoration slots. Let me make a comparison with a different Artian versus Shia weapon setup that does it a lot better. We have Longsword here and how it benefits a lot from its decoration slots, but it wants crit boost and the razor sharp handicraft as always. In this case then, you get 5 levels of critical boost, you still get the razor sharp and handicraft that you need, and then there's nothing else there that's too super important. So when you equip the Shia Longsword by comparison, yes, the decoration slots are worse, but you're still able to get all that razor sharp and handicraft, you're still able to get the crit boost, it's just level 3 instead of level 5. Obviously not perfect or ideal, but it's less of a sacrifice, which, you know, you can definitely feel in comparison. So sadly for the Shia Dual Blades, those slots really hurt. And that's on top of the 5 less raw that you could get with a perfect Artian and the smaller Dragon element. However, it does benefit from a very unique and impactful skill, the Whiteflame Torrent, which is going to result in those pops of 50 damage regularly. We found in our testing, thanks to Cotton, that on average, faster weapons like SNS and Dual Blades, they can pop it every 6 seconds or so if you're attacking constantly. So over the length of say 10,000 damage, attacking constantly for that time, it equated to about 4.5% of the overall damage. That's solid, but it definitely doesn't outweigh the benefits of the decoration slots of Artian. You can equate more percent of the damage to Whiteflame though, the worse you play, the worse your build, because you know, more of your overall damage will be those 50 pops. But that's obviously not the best way to approach meta builds, is it? No matter what way you look at it. So less raw on the weapon, less element, worse decoration slots. A cool and useful skill, but it really needs better slots to be meta competitive. So you're going to want a perfect Artian weapon, and we're going to cover what that really means. In those 3-3 slots then, you're going to want 3 crit boost, 3 razor sharp, and 1 level of handicraft on the back of that if you can. This will massively help your sharpness issues, and the crit boost is going to go a long way, more than crit element would still. Naturally, you're going to want the element attack that you're using, so in this case we have dragon weapon, so dragon attack, and then you get 1 other skill with 1 level. This could either be focus or crit element. Crit element will provide you more damage, but focus is extremely comfy to help you build your demon gauge effectively with less attacks, which gets you to the best DPS combos and staying there longer. So it's up to you. I find focus very comfy, but crit element is technically more DPS on paper. But what about your ideal craft for your Artian weapon? Like I said a moment ago, element isn't as valuable right now considering the poor element hit zones of the tier 3 monsters we have at the moment. So, should you do reinforcement bonuses for attack boost, or should you go element boost like I used to be doing? A maxed out element dual blades will be 205 raw and 350 base of that element, whereas a maxed out attack boost focus will be 225 raw and then 270 base element to work with. But how can we tell which is more valuable? Well, here's how Josh explained that conclusion to me using this math. If we take a look at the element boost of your Artian weapons, with dual blades you get 20 element per boost. That's the bloated number, so you divide that by 10, that brings you to 2 true element per boost. If you consider Zoshia's exposed head as the ideal hit zone that we have right now for tier 3 monsters, that's a 30 hit zone. So let's take that true element and multiply it by the hit zone, giving us a number of 0.6. We'll multiply that by the element white sharpness, so that's 15% damage increase, bringing us to 0.69. Now dual blade's average element motion value is 0.8, so multiply that by the 0.69, bringing us overall to 0.552. So essentially, each element boost equates to 0.552 damage for each element reinforce on an ideal hit zone like Zoshia's exposed head. Meanwhile, we have the attack focused version of the same thing. Each reinforcement bonus we get is 5 raw. So let's multiply that 5 by the white sharpness again. That's a 32% damage increase compared to the element. So that brings us to 6.6. Once again, we'll consider Zoshia's exposed head. That has a 65/hit zone. So 6.6 times 0.65 brings us to 4.29. Now, dual blade's average motion value for raw is 15. So 4.29 times that 0.15 brings us to 0.6435. So you're getting 0.6435 damage for each raw reinforce on a good hit zone like Zoshia's exposed head. This comparison shows you that you are getting more value out of each raw reinforce than you are each element reinforce. Personally, that's a sad conclusion to me. And remember, that's in the context of Zoshia's exposed head, which again is a 30 element hit zone. That's one of the best element hit zones we have for a tier 3 monster, and even there, raw is winning. Across the roster in general, raw hit zones are great. There's plenty of better ones in fact across different monsters. So on average, raw is pushing well ahead of element boosts on your reinforcements for the moment. But maybe in the future, we'll see element hit zones of 35 and higher for the higher tier monsters. And at that point, things might change if the devs don't change something else around. But I hope this overview helps you understand why we're now running these Artian weapons that are still dragon or whatever element you want to run, like this one's thunder. But for the reinforcement, we're going all the way on attack boost instead of element boost because we're getting more value out of each one of those than element boost. Next up, another important change in Title Update 1, which is Corrupted Mantle and also Evasion Mantle, which is actually a reasonable choice now. Corrupted Mantle was nerfed to last 30 seconds less than it did before, and overall has a rough 10% loss on the motion values of the extra damage procs you were getting. This is alongside 5% less raw and 10% less affinity overall at phase 2 of Corrupted Mantle. Now, Dual Blades was pretty damn incredible for proccing those extra hits by maximizing Archdemon mode. You would use double slash into Demon Flurry 1 and then just repeat that infinite combo super fast and effectively for incredible DPS for the duration of the mantle by hyper procking those extra hits. Now, they will deal less damage as an extra hit, and overall you're going to get less affinity and less raw while it's on. But it is still an incredible option. So I still see it as an incredible, super straightforward option. However, I would say that Evasion Mantle is a lot better and a perfectly reasonable choice now. Not only does it last longer, but it synergizes with the whole demon boost management and the perfect evade system. It wants you to land perfect evades, and Dual Blades wants to do that anyway, so it just works really well. So if you prefer the idea of just running Evasion Mantle instead, then absolutely go for it. And there, you wouldn't have to change your main DPS combo while the mantle is on, so it's perfectly viable. But now with all that explained, it's time to go through the 3 sets and why we've come to these conclusions. We have a max DPS set, a much more comfortable but slightly weaker set, and then we have the dragon set. Let's start with the max DPS set, with a pretty big downside to it, one evade window. Here's the set. We have Shia, helm, and chest, both in beta. We have the two-piece gore, as you'd expect, but the gloves are in beta, and the waist is in alpha. That is because it has the 1 level of antivirus on it. So don't forget that. We have the new Mizutsune greaves, the legs, in beta. They come with a 3 slot and 2 levels of burst, which is awesome. Then we have the Challenger charm for 2 levels of agitator. Just to remind you for the offensive decoration slots on this, you have the element that you're using, and then either 1 level of focus or crit element, your choice, razor sharp and 1 handicraft, and then the critical boost. Overall, these are the decorations I'm using to achieve this skill list. 5 out of 5 agitator and burst, 3 levels of constitution, coalescence, antivirus, and then we sneak in 1 level of adrenaline rush and evade window and recovery speed. Couple cool details about this then. We of course have 2 set with gore, providing you with frenzy so you can make the most out of your antivirus, amounting to that classic 25% affinity when cleansed. But we also have the new Shia's Pulse here, which allows you to recover some of your health over time. The idea is that you get hit and then you have that little bit of red that's slowly healing up the recoverable health. You heal past the red recovery and just keep healing all the way like passive regen. It's super nice. The more recovery speed you have, by the way, the faster you get that red back and get into the healing of Shia super quick. So this is a really nice, comfortable aspect of the build. Now, another important aspect of the build is Agitator. This activates while the monster is enraged, and at level 5 like we have here, that's 20 raw and 15% affinity while it's going. Now for the math, we average this to a 50% uptime for a normal player. But you know, even in normal hunts, it can be more than that. And you often see speedrunners value Agitator even more than we do, because they're ending the hunts even faster, where it becomes even more valuable because more of the fight it was active. But we base our math on 50% to keep things consistent. So let's cover the math of this set. Starting with the raw, we have on a perfect Artian here, the base raw is 225. Then from burst 5, we're going to get 18. From adrenaline 1, we're going to get 10. And agitator 5, at 50% uptime, that's 10 more raw. So 263. Multiply that by the 32% of white sharpness, bringing us to 347. With this set, we have lower affinity on average, amounting to 37.5%. That's 5% from the base Artian, 25% from antivirus. We've got 7.5% from the agitator with 50% uptime. And then of course this is being multiplied by 3 crit boost, which is a 34% damage increase. So it's more like a 15% damage increase on average. So let's multiply our 347 by that, and that brings us to 399 effective raw with this set. You'll happily use this set with every element except dragon because we have a specific set for that. And as I've said, this will scale higher if you have higher agitator uptime. So the smoother the run, the higher that effective raw will be. But you know, compared to the old set raw, that was 369. So it's a 30 effective raw increase, even with 50% uptime on agitator. Really nice. But there's a major issue here in terms of quality of life, which is evade window. That massively improves your experience at perfect evading and maintaining demon boost. So if this is too little for you, I strongly recommend this next set that will feel better. So this is the more comfy and straightforward version. As you can see, we have 4 pieces of gore this time, all in beta, with the new Mizutsune greaves, the legs, in beta once again, for the nice burst that provides. This time we're using Exploiter Charm, so we're leaning more on weakness exploit than we are agitator in this case. Once again, for offensive decorations, it's the same thing. Your element attack, and then either focus or crit element for that 1 level, razor sharp and handicraft, and then you crit boost. Here are the decorations we use to achieve this skill list. 5 out of 5 burst, 4 evade window, which is incredible, the constitution level 3, maxed out coalescence, antivirus, the 2 weakness exploit, 1 adrenaline rush, and overall for set bonuses, it's just gore at a 4 piece, providing us the raw that gives us. So by comparison, this is going to feel so much more comfortable with the nice constitution stamina perks and the 4 evade window especially. It's more consistent and it's also free from the ups and downs of agitator. Let's take a look at the math of this set. With the same weapon setup then, the perfect Artian, we have 225 base raw. This is going to get 18 from burst 5 again, but now from the 4 piece of gore, also 15 more raw there. We get 10 from adrenaline 1 once again, bringing us to 268 at this point. Then we multiply this by 32% from white sharpness, bringing us to 354. Now we have slightly more affinity at 40%, and that's got 3 crit boost behind it for the 34% damage increase. So that's up 40% of the time. It's more like a 13.6% damage increase. So we multiply that by the 354, bringing us to 402 effective raw. Now that might suggest that the effective raw of this set is ever so slightly higher, but again, if agitator's up more than 50% of the time, which it probably will be, and especially on good runs, then yes, the first set around agitator will scale better. Now between the two of them, it is ultimately the same element because that's not being affected in a different way between the sets. You'll run either one of these sets and then just swap between the 4 elements outside of dragon based on what you're dealing with. The element in this case then, the base element, is 270 to start with. We times that by 1.2 thanks to the element attack 3 levels, bringing us to 324. Then we have coalescence 3, which is 15% increase, bringing us to 372.6. We add to that with 3 element attack, the 60 that provides, then the 120 element from burst 5, bringing us to 552.6 element. That's the bloated number though, so we divide that by 10 to get the true element, which is 55.26. That then would be modified by white sharpness, which is a 15% damage increase. So it's essentially 64 effective element on both of the sets. So between the max DPS agitator set and the more comfy version, you want to go with what works for you. There isn't a massive difference between the two, it's just definitely the case that the agitator has higher potential. Personally, I'd advise the much more comfy set for normal gameplay. The 4 evade window is such a genuine dream to have in a meta set. But if you are comfortable with only one, there's still comfort in set 1, thanks to the Shia 2-piece, that passive healing you'll get. So it's your choice to make, we're just presenting the 2 best options we put together. But there's a third set, the dragon one, so let's talk about it. This is simply too good to ignore for any dragon matchup, such as of course Shia. We have arkveld in beta for the helmet and the chest, that's regular arkveld. Then we have guardian arkveld for the gloves, in beta again, and then we have gore 2-piece for the belt and the legs. And finally, the talisman, it's the convert charm, which allows convert element at level 2, allowing us to reach that higher level of it, which is awesome. Once again, for your offensive decorations, it's the same as before, the element that you're using, so in this case dragon, and then with that, either focus or crit element, focus being the more comfy option, the razor sharp in handicraft, and the critical jewel. I use these decorations to achieve this lineup of skills: 5 out of 5 weakness exploit, the 3 constitution, the 3 evade window, which is just right about right, convert element at 3 out of 3, marathon runner, which is great, the antivirus, 1 adrenaline rush, 1 burst, and then a bit of flinch free. It is a very comfortable and awesome set, but a lot of this centers around, of course, convert element. So we need to cover that. What this does is when you get hit by an element attack, it converts it and activates it for you. It's going to push your dragon element and boost it by a lot per level, but it's also going to start providing you with procs of dragon explosions, which will be a set number that scales per level as well. So that dragon burst explosion will be 310 at level 3 with the right setup for dual blades, or if you had the right setup for a switch axe. It doesn't matter what weapon you're using. So that kind of damage number on dual blades that normally works with smaller numbers on average, well, that's incredible. The problem was the skill levels were quite an investment, and the nature of actually proccing that burst was awkward. So I'd like to thank Cotton for his work investigating convert element for a video we did a couple weeks back, letting us really see how it's changed now. So the skill will activate when you take any element damage. Different weapons can use, iframes and hyper armor to not take the damage but still trigger the convert element. So blocks, iframe dodges, any source of element hitting you during these, it'll work. But while it's active for the next 2 minutes, you enjoy increased element. Say 80 extra dragon at level 1 or 180 extra dragon at level 3, so that's a lot. But after those 2 minutes, it drops and then it starts a forced cooldown of 90 seconds. It'll let you know on a pop-up on the right that it's ready to be triggered again when that time's passed. But an important part of all of this is the dragon blast, as we're calling it. Essentially, you're proccing a blast of dragon like the blast status, just extra strong. At level 3 with the right setup, like I said, it's 310 damage per proc, which is amazing. And you should be able to trigger it multiple times within the 2-minute window. But how do you do that? Well, you just deal enough damage, building up essentially a hidden stat, which when built up enough will proc the damage just like a status. The problem we'd found with Dragon Burst in the past is that it wouldn't build up on different kinds of attacks. Pre-title update 1, Cotton found that many attacks across the weapons wouldn't build it up. But what we care about in this context is dual blades, and for dual blades, it was Demon Flurry and Blade Dance as combos that weren't triggering this Dragon Blast, which is obviously super important for our DPS and a big problem in this context. Well, I've got good news for title update 1. Suddenly, it's working for those attacks now. In my tests, it was working for, say, your classic sixfold Demon Slash combo, the Archdemon Demon Flurry combo, the all-important Blade Dance combo, and other stuff like, Demon Flurry Rush. Therefore, the skill is better than ever for dual blades and significantly more reliable. And with our new setups to invest more in raw and less in pushing element, Convert Element lets you bridge the gap with this massive injection of Dragon Element and then all that extra Dragon Blast damage on top. And so you should invest in it for a build for Dragon. Any monster that will be weak to Dragon is going to be great for this concept. Like I said, Shia is a prime example. So let's do the math for the Dragon Convert set. Starting with the raw again. We still have the 225 base raw. Here we're getting 8 more raw from burst 1 and 10 from adrenaline rush 1. So that brings us to 243. Multiply that by the white sharpness and that brings us to 321. This time we have 60% reliable affinity and again 3 crit boosts. So 34% damage increase, 60% of the time. It's more like 20.4% damage increase. So 321 times that brings us to 387 effective raw. Which is, yes, 13 less effective raw than the other 2 sets on paper, but in exchange, you get this incredible dragon element and the blast of that dragon. So looking at the element math by comparison, we once again have a base of 270. We times that by 1.2 from the LE attack 3 again, bring us to 324. We're also going to get 60 flat element from that element attack 3, so that brings us to 384. Next, we have burst 1, so that's 40 element there, and convert element 3, so that's 180 there. So while element convert is going, we have 604 element. Divide that by 10 to debloat it, and that means we have 64.4 true element. And on top of that, the dragon explosions to 310 each time they proc while convert is going. So it's pretty insane. But now the question, which of these 3 sets should you use and when? Well, ultimately, if the monster is weakest to dragon with at least a 15 or even 20 element hit zone for that, then you should be using the Dragon Convert Element set. Not only do you get to double dip on your raw and element, but you're going to be getting those crazy bursts of 310 dragon at those times, which feels amazing. Otherwise, you'll pick between set 1 or 2 based on your preference, and make sure you're using the right element that the monster is weak to with the correct weapon setup. Personally, like I said, I prefer the second set, which has the 4 evade window. That comfort is just so nice. But of course, you could push higher DPS with the first set if you minimize the hunt duration and make the most of that agitator. But it comes at a cost with just 1 evade window, which isn't nearly as nice to use. But if you're confident about your perfect evades, then it's a great way to get the most DPS, which is important for us to cover. But there you have it. I hope these overviews of the relevant changes of Title Update 1 were useful. A big thank you again to Josh for the involved effort on this one. It's definitely been a lot to consider, and he's put together some great builds to address the new meta state. So if you guys appreciate it, be sure to drop a like. Next up, I'm going to be continuing on to Switch Axe, but we'll be coming back around to dual blades and the other weapons for less meta builds again as always. Though hopefully this time without issue for daring to cover those topics that we normally would. We've been covering dual blades for years now on the channel, and we don't plan on changing that. Until next time then, I've been Hollow, you've been you, and thanks for watching.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.